All right, so we talked a little bit about the problems setting up the government. Now let's talk about some of the actual problems the country had. They fall into two categories: problems that they had internally and problems that they had with other countries. First of all, the paper money that Congress had printed during the war did not hold its value. You see me being snarky in the parentheses. I've told you before, it doesn't work when you just print money. That's not a good thing to do. It never works out well. And it doesn't work out well here. The money becomes virtually worthless to the point where food riots break out in Boston because people can't afford to buy food. Because what happens is, again, inflation takes over. Remember the inflation rat. So pretty soon the loaf of bread that costs a quarter now costs $1.25 and then $2.25, and people don't have enough money because the money's, and if they have lots of paper money, no one wants to trade for your paper money because it's worthless. And the new government still owes its soldiers a lot of money for service in the war. A lot of them had not been paid. They kept on serving in the war because they believed in the cause, and they felt like they were going to trust these people to pay them eventually, but they never were getting paid. And you're going to see what happens is they end up getting paid in land, which a lot of them are happy to have, but the government is land rich but money poor. All right, so the government has no way to tax because Articles of Confederation doesn't give them a way to tax, and so they have no way to raise money. And so the Congress goes to the states and they say, states, help us out. You have money, but the states, they can't force the states to pay. And in the real world, the states don't have any money either because a lot of the New England states had been involved in the war and they didn't have any money. And the southern states operate really, a significant amount of them operate on a system of trade with England. And that trade had been depressed during the war. And if they were trading with each other, they were operating on a system of barter. And so they don't have any money either. So there's a suggestion of an import tax, but it's shot down due to the single no vote of Rhode Island. And again, taxation is something that the colonists are really a little uncomfortable with because they've just fought a war over it. So, and like I said, one no vote and it gets shot down, and Rhode Island was the no vote. Now they have, of course, issues with Britain. American merchants are complaining that the British were blocking them from using ports in the West Indies, and that was likely true. And even though the British and the Americans kind of wanted to just get back to business as usual, there's hard feelings, and there's bound to be hard feelings between the two countries. It's just the way things are going to be. Also, in the Treaty of Paris, 1783, the British have agreed to get out of every fort that they have built in the area that's west of the Appalachians. And there weren't that many, but there were quite a few west of the Appalachians. And like think about that area that was the Northwest Territory, and think about the area that was the west of Georgia and all that area in the South. Not too many forts in the South, but more in the Northwest Territory, because they had set up and gone in and occupied maybe old French forts, but set up trading posts and areas to trade with the Native Americans for furs after the French and Indian War. Well, they're not supposed to be there anymore. But guess what? There's no satellite spies in the sky, and in reality, there are a lot of places where the British are still in those forts. You need to put this in the back of your computer brains because it's going to cause problems later on. So John Adams, that's Sam Adams's cousin, is sent to London to try to get things ironed out, but the British won't even talk about trade issues because they feel that the Americans have not held up their part of the Treaty of Paris. They claim that the Americans have taken land and taken businesses away from loyalists during the war. Remember, I told you some people were loyal to the king, and that's probably true. Those people were supposed to be paid after the war. In part of the treaty said that the new American government was supposed to pay these people back for any land that was taken or any business losses for the people that were loyal to the king. Well, I don't think that was happening, not really. And so that was probably true. So there was probably two wrongs here. The British probably were keeping the Americans out of those ports that they were supposed to be able to use, and the Americans probably were not paying back the British loyalists for the property damage or just taking the property away that they had done during the war. So there's issues here going on. And Congress says, okay, we don't have the money to pay. The British want us to pay. Maybe we should pay. Maybe that'll solve the problem. So states, you pay these people for their land. But again, the states don't have any money either. It's foolishness. It's utter ridiculousness. So there's the whole problem, and it doesn't get solved. So there's bad feelings. There's naturally bad feelings between the Americans and the British because of the war. But even though they want to go back to trading and business as usual, there's going to be bad feelings there too because of these economic things that are going on that have not been addressed. And really on the American side, they can't be addressed because the new country doesn't have any money. Now, let's talk about Spain for a minute because this gets a little bit, at least I think it's interesting. So there's worse problems with Spain because, remember, Spain occupies all the rest of the continent almost. And Spain helped us out during the American Revolution. And I have not read this anywhere, so I don't know it to be true. I suspected that's not true. I have kind of read it in a couple places. Spain was sort of hoping that America would fall on its face. After becoming independent, the new country would somehow not make it. And then who would be there to help pick the pieces up? Why, it would be Spain. Because they have all the rest of the continent, they'd be right there to help out. Well, there was an issue because now remember, in the Treaty of Paris, 1763, Spain retained control of the port of New Orleans. This is very important for the new United States because the Mississippi River is one of the biggest roads for them. So they don't have highways, they don't have roads. Their roads, their way of moving things around in this new country of theirs is on the river system, plain and simple. It's by boat because they don't have roads to speak of yet. And so the Mississippi River is hugely important, especially if they want to move people into those western lands, have farmers that are able to ship their stuff out down the Ohio River, out to the Gulf of Mexico. They have to have the port of New Orleans. But Spain closes it to them. They're like, I'm sorry, we're done with you now. Because they want to charge port fees. Okay, so think of it like you pull your ship into the dock and you're supposed to pay to be able to use the dock while you're there. Port fees, sort of like, I don't know, if you have an RV and you're staying in an RV park, you have to pay to stay there, sort of the same thing. But the Americans are very good at smuggling. And so Spain realizes that somehow the Americans are docking in other places, not at the real legal port. They're going other places to dock and offload and onload. And Spain isn't happy with it. And the Americans are probably doing that because they have become very good at it. And so they're like, okay, we're just closing the port to you. This is not good at all. This is very bad. Okay. So the Americans don't pay the fees. They just continue on smuggling. And Spain is also worried about American expansionism. They're afraid now they're going to maybe want to move further west. But really, honestly, the major reason was the smuggling. Spain is not really afraid of America at this point. They know that it's a baby country, and really, they are not really afraid of them, especially.